Hello, it's Jake from Monkey Gamer Games, and today we're going to be looking at game design visuals. In this video we'll be looking at world, characters, feedback interface, perspectives, and full motion video. First we'll talk about worlds. The first world I will talk about is Mass Effect. Mass Effect is an open space exploration third-person shooter. We'll talk about its visual style and quality. The visual style changes from game to game. It is quite blurry, and the maps are very open. There are a lot of texture pop-ins, and because of its age, it has many low-resolution textures and objects that lack significant detail. The colour blue is used quite a lot in the first game to give it a feel of safety, because people do not often see the colour blue as a sign of danger, and places like your ship have a lot of blue textures, unlike Mass Effect 2, which has a very dark feel, to give a sign of danger with its dark textures and dark colours, because you're in dangerous places throughout the entire game. The colour red is used a lot in the game. People often see red as danger, and fits with the rest of the plot of the game. It fits with the game because you are in slums and abandoned places throughout most of the game. The map's design is also very narrow, adding to the tension and giving you a sense of confinement in such an open world game. Unlike Mass Effect 3, which has a much more open feel, it has a brighter colour scheme and higher resolution textures because it is the newest out of them all and only came out in 2012. The areas are also more open, and like I said before, they are much brighter. The graphics are very high quality, and the textures are very high resolution, as they lack visible pixels, which adds to the realism and immersion of the game. Most of the world is very metallic, which links to sci-fi and space, which further immerses the player in the game. It also uses quite a lot of blue textures yet again to add to the sense of safety, or in this game's case false safety, as we will go on later, and a futuristic look of space. Now we will look at the changes that the game has had through time and through its development stage. Apart from significant graphical upgrades throughout Mass Effect 2 and 3, they also improved on other things from Mass Effect 1, like render distance, which allows the player to see further, better textures because of the upgrades in technology, and have improved the size of the maps, because Mass Effect 1, due to its age and the technology around, did not have the biggest maps and were more background textures. Mass Effect 2 and 3 improved on this, getting rid of the textures backgrounds and adding more of a playable area. The motion blur has also been gradually turned down over the two sequels. Next we'll move on to the audience that this game targets. The game and world were designed for an audience that likes exploration and immersive, well written. This game also targets fans of RPGs. Next we will talk about the tone of the game and the mood it sets when you play it, or is intended to set with the design of the world. The tone tries to trick you in certain areas, like the Citadel, for example, It looks bright and vibrant, with statues, lakes, and even an artificial sky. It gives the mood of peace. The Citadel looks like this because it gives you the effect of safety in a place that is not. It gives the illusion to the player that they are safe, even when the rest of the game's story is about everything being destroyed and all life coming to an end. And another example is of a complete opposite to the Citadel, called Omega. Omega is dark and gritty because in the game it is very gang related. They designed it to look dangerous and not to give the illusion that it is safe, unlike the Citadel. There is a lot of red on Omega, signifying danger, and the dark textures and colour scheme add to that sense of tension and danger. Next we will talk about the game engine used to create the game. BioWare used the Unreal 3 engine to create Mass Effect 3, which allowed them to have high quality graphics and textures, and to integrate their cover system that they had from the previous games, and to improve on it with Unreal's physics. It also allowed them to up the scale of the game and improve the mechanics. However, BioWare have recently changed to the Frostbite engine, which is the engine that Battlefield runs in. They made this transition so they could improve the destructibility of the terrain, because Frostbite allows for buildings and other parts of the terrain to be destroyed and damaged. This will further add to the immersion that you are in a war zone, because you will see bits of building and wall chip away as they get hit. This also adds to the game's cover system, as a wall will chip away after the enemy has fired at it for so long, meaning you cannot stay in one place like you did on the previous games, further adding to the immersion. The game tries to stay true to its original feel, because people would not recognise it as a franchise if all of the games felt different. They change the feel slightly each time, but keep the overall feel the same. We will now move on to the next game I'll be talking about, which is Skyrim. Skyrim is a medieval fantasy first person / third person adventure game. It is open world. This game relies on its enormous world, full of quests and things to find and do. Now we will talk about the visual style and quality of the game. The visual style is very mountainous and lush with plants and animals. The cities are spread far apart over the map, lots of little towns in between, and buildings around for you to find. It has plenty of trees, mountains and waterfalls, and the field of view is extremely large. From the highest point in the game, you can nearly see the entire map, giving you an extreme feel of scale and design of the world. The quality is very high, evident by the high resolution textures and lack of visible pixels on the screen. Now we will talk about how it has changed over time. The Elder Scrolls games have evolved significantly. Elder Scrolls 1 Arena launched in 1994. It has evolved from a 2D first person open world text based game to a 3D open world fully voice acted, characters and dialogue, as well as a significant graphics upgrade. It has gone from a low resolution game with a lot of visible pixels on the screen to a high resolution game with high resolution textures, 3D models, and very few visible pixels on the screen. Now we will talk about what the audience expects from an Elder Scrolls game. The audience and the fans know what to expect from an Elder Scrolls game because of the length of time they've been out. Like I said before, Arena launched in 1994. The second game, Elder Scrolls 2 Daggerfall, launched in 1996. The third game, Elder Scrolls 3 Morrowind, launched in 2002. Oblivion, which was the fourth game, launched in 2006. And finally Skyrim, launched in 2011. The audience expects the world to be open and to have depth. They expect the next game to have what Elder Scrolls is known for, which is no invisible walls or restrictions. Next we will talk about the tone and mood that the game sets. The game sets the mood and tone in a medieval setting with a fantasy twist. The world is designed to look very natural, with very few buildings dotted around. The aim is for you to look at the snowy and grassy landscapes and to make you feel like you're there. The amount of detail that has been put into designing the world, it gives a real scale of immersion. When you walk into a city, it really gives you the sense that you're in a medieval world, with all the dark colours, high resolution textures of wooden logs and bricks around, and Skyrim's distinctive wood shapes on top of people's houses, with carvings in them, which gives a real impression of a Viking/Nordic era. Bethesda used a game engine called the Creation Engine, or Creation Kit, which improved the AI that was used in Oblivion, improved the visuals and made people look more realistic. It allowed more detail to be added to the world, like the models of mountains and NPCs. It also allowed for more dynamic mechanics, such as killing animations and a permanent sprint button. The Elder Scrolls series has changed a lot over the years and look very different. For example, Oblivion looks very bright and pastely, as Skyrim has a darker colour scheme, and therefore gives a much more darker feel to the game. Next we will talk about a game called Bioshock. We will be covering Bioshock 1 and Bioshock Infinite. Bioshock is a first-person alternate history game. The Bioshock games are genre specific because you always expect a map from Bioshock to be abstract. For example, the first Bioshock game takes place in a place called Rapture, which is a city under the sea, and Bioshock Infinite is of a place called Columbia, which is a floating city in the sky. Next we will talk about the visual style of the game and quality of it. The Bioshock games have a 1920s feel with a steampunk twist. It is all based on looks for the Bioshock games. Rapture looks very dark because it is under the sea. It is steampunk because it has little robots flying around in the 1920s and technology they didn't have. Also, it has lots of glass tubes and metal objects which add to the steampunk feel. Bioshock's map, Rapture, is also given more immersion by the dark textures and colour scheme of this destroyed city under the sea. Everything in it is trying to kill you. There is a lot of ambient noises in Rapture as well, which also adds to the tension and claustrophobic feeling of narrow corridors that are leaking with water, and people singing and babies crying, and you don't know where they're coming from. It all adds to the immersion. Now we will talk about how BioShock has changed over time. The world of BioShock has always been obscure, but the worlds have changed significantly throughout the different games. It started with Rapture, which, as I mentioned previously, was a city under the sea, and then moved on to Columbia, which was a floating city. BioShock aims to be unique, and the development team behind the maps are in charge of creating a new world that is unique to BioShock. Now we will talk about what audience BioShock aims at. The games are audience specific because BioShock has such a unique landscape. If it didn't have such a unique landscape every time, people would not recognise the game as a BioShock. If BioShock did not have their unique worlds, it would not feel like a BioShock game. People recognise BioShocks from the unique worlds, like people recognise Halo through Master Chief. Now we will talk about the tone and the mood that BioShock sets. The tone of the game changes from each. For example, Rapture gives off a completely different feeling to Columbia, because Rapture is dark and damaged and under the sea, with people wanting to kill you. It relies on its horror aspects to create tension, while BioShock Infinite creates the illusion of safety, like the Citadel did. They are both just as dangerous places, but one attempts to hide it, and one does not, because Columbia is extremely bright, and when you get there, everyone is very happy and cheerful. It gives you the sense that everything is almost too perfect, and creates a feeling of distrust between the characters. Now we will talk about the game engine, Irrational Games, used to create BioShock. They run a modified version of Unreal Engine 2.5 with some elements of Unreal Engine 3. They also used Havok's physics engine, which allowed better visuals and better destruction physics, and improved AI. The first two BioShock games are set in the same place, but the third game does not try to stay loyal to its original look of dark, murky first-person / horror game. It changes into a bright, vibrant game, even though it is not, and it's all false. They changed the feel of the game to add this illusion of safety to a place that is not. They also wanted the games to look different and be unique to each other. Next we will talk about Minecraft. Minecraft is a 3D adventure building game that is free roam, that relies on the aspect of building things. It goes to a simpler time of gaming, where you can pick stuff up and put them anywhere you want. The simplicity of the graphics also make it look more appealing. Because of its simple pixel design, it makes you recognise what game it is instantly. The game looks unique. The pixels are visible because that is a part of the art design. Everything is blocky, and of today's standards of games, the graphics could be considered low, but because this is the way that the game is designed, it works. It would also not be the same game without its simple graphic design, because you're made out of blocks, and you're in a blocky world. It fits together perfectly. We will now talk about how the game has changed over its development cycle. The game has remained true to its original art design, and has not really changed at all since it started being developed. Now I will talk about the characters within different types of games. I'll give a brief overview of the initial character design within the games that I am talking about, and then I will choose one of the characters from that game and talk about them individually. The first game I'll be talking about is Beyond Two Souls. Firstly, I'll talk about the purpose of the characters. The purpose of the characters is to make the player feel like they're in a real life scenario because of how they're written and acted with the help of motion capture, creating real movements, which makes the characters feel more real and not just an animation. For example, the main character, who is called Jodie, is acted in a way to make her story believable and not make the character feel like a superhero. Her story is believable because you start playing as this character from when she is a child and grow up through missions and watch the character grow based on the decisions you've made. This game relies on its deep story and well written characters. The playable character's purpose, who's called Jodie, is to further immerse you in the story with her in-depth backstory, and the purpose of the character and story is to make you care about the character. The game makes you care about the character more because you make your decisions, so the character evolves based on the decisions you would make, which makes the player feel more attached to the character and want to play as them. Next we'll talk about how the character enhances the story. The character, Jodie, enhances the story by being the playable character, and the decisions you make enhance the story in different ways. Some decisions you make in the game can have positive effects on the character's well-being and personality, and some can have negatives. Next we will talk about the emotional responses to the characters. You get the impression that you know the character because of how you play them. You play through Jodie's life from a child to an adult, which gives you the feeling that you know them. They also give you an emotional response because they are acted by real actors, and with the use of motion capture, the characters move realistically and are more believable, adding to the immersion and making it more believable that this character is a real person. Next we'll talk about how much you can identify with the character. You can identify with the character because you create their morals and attitude when you make decisions in the game. It changes the character's personality based on those decisions, which makes it easier for the player to identify the character and feel like they know them because they both have the same morals and attitudes because you chose the decisions for her to make. We'll now talk about the character's physical appearance. The character designs in this game are normal. The characters are made to look like normal people and to look like the actors who are voice acting them by the developers using a scanning device to map their face onto the character, making it more believable because they look like real people, move like real people, and talk like real people. There are no weird abnormalities with the character design. The character designs in Beyond Two Souls are basic, like I mentioned earlier. An example for a character design in a game that is not basic and is meant to look abnormal is the characters from the Gears of War franchise, because they look very muscular. The characters are so muscular, they are considered to be an abnormal design. Next we will talk about the behaviour of the character. Much of the player's story is made and developed by using cutscenes, which is then usually followed up by some kind of choice for you to make. Next we'll talk about how customizable the character is. There are no real customizable elements to the playable character other than the story. There are no real customizable elements to the playable character other than the story. The physical appearance of the character is very limited in terms of customization. The character changes looks mission by mission. Most of the character's looks are scripted to that particular mission and cannot be changed. Some light elements of appearance customization is available, like choosing what to wear to go out, but no facial customization. Now we will talk about the effects it had on the game. The game loses nothing with the lack of customization of the character, because the story is so customizable, which makes the game more based around you and more interesting. Next we'll talk about the NPC, or non-playable characters. The NPC enemies are not really balanced because of your character's ability. There is not much combat in the game, but when there is, you gain nothing from it, because your ability allows you to one-hit pretty much every enemy in the game, making combat dull and unimportant. The AI level is very high. The AI is independent from the player and does not need the player to trigger anything for them to do something, unless it is scripted in the story for them to do that. Most of character interaction in Beyond Two Souls is done through cutscenes, and a lot of AI encounters are done through scripted moments. The company that makes Beyond Two Souls is called Quantic Dream, and most of their games have very similar AI. Most of Quantic Dream's games rely on cutscenes to develop their characters, rather than AI interaction. Now we will talk about The type of animation used when creating the game. The type of animation used was motion capture. Motion capture allows animation of a character to be more fluent and realistic when compared to traditional computer animation. It also makes the characters look more believable because the actors get to voice act them and act, so they can add movements and expressions to what they're talking about while using motion capture, which adds to the immersion and realism of the game and its characters. The next game I will talk about is Mass Effect. The characters in Mass Effect have rich backstories that get developed further throughout the games. They also adapt through the games as well. For example, if you imported your character from Mass Effect 1 into Mass Effect 2 and something happened to a character, they would remember that and be affected by that in positive or negative ways. Now we will talk about the purpose of the characters. The purpose of the characters in Mass Effect is to help you in missions and for you to have an emotional response to them. Because of their rich backstory, you feel like you know them, and the game relies on this, because you feel like you can identify with them. We will now talk about the physical appearances of the characters in Mass Effect. Some characters in Mass Effect are human, and some are aliens. The human characters look realistic, with no real abnormalities, and the aliens all have unique designs, making them easily recognizable. The game uses cutscenes to reveal characters, and then becomes player controlled. You can tell your teammates where to go, or you can leave them to be independent. The AI is good, so your team is effective whichever one you pick. Most of the character interaction done in the game is either done through cutscenes or dialogue sequences. I will now talk about the customization within the game. The game is heavily customizable. You can change how your character looks, what gender your character is, and their backstory. The story is also customizable, as you make your own decisions through the game. The character customization has very little effect on the story or the game, but it is very detailed, allowing you to change everything on the face, like nose, mouth and eyes. Armor customization is also available, but it is very limited, and they have small perks like additional health and ammo. You can also customize your loadouts to pick what weapons you take into a mission, and what weapons and armor your teammate takes in. The purpose of Garrus's character is to aid you in missions and to add an additional story to the game, because the character has such a rich backstory. The character also can provide some comedic roles in the game. Garrus is influenced by the genre of the game, which is sci-fi, because he is an alien. I will now describe the physical appearance of the character. Garrus has a hard-looking exterior and a colossal scar on the side of his face. This gives the impression that the character is tough. The character enhances the story differently in each game. The character tends to be an important role in the story. For example, in the first game, he is one of the characters that enhances the story and moves it forward. And in the second game, He is one of the essential characters you have to find to move the story forward. He usually has a big role within the story of the game. You have an emotional response to the character because of the rich backstory behind them, which is continued and developed through the 3 games, and gives the impression that you know the character, which leads to further immersion in the game. Garrus is a character to identify with, because fans of the series will know who he is just by seeing a picture of him, because he looks unique. Garrus' physical appearance is also very recognisable to fans because of his blue face paint, his eyepiece, and his giant scar. Garrus is male and mostly wears armour. He's also an alien. Garrus is revealed by a cutscene in all 3 games, and then immediately opened up to a dialogue sequence. You can change Garrus' armour/armour colour in all 3 games, and you can change his loadout.
So, anyone want to talk about their people's history? Nothing? Oh, come on. I can't be the only one who misses those times we used to chat in the elevators back on the Citadel.
Saren was one of the most respected Turians in the galaxy, Garrus. You gonna be okay going up against him?
Saren is either a traitor or a madman. Taking him down will restore the good name of Turians everywhere.
Just keep saying that, especially to humans. We've got a lot of angry people right now.
I'd love to see what the Normandy can do in a fight.
We will now talk about perspective. First we will talk about a game called Dawn of War. Dawn of War is a 3D game that has an aerial view. It looks like this because it is a strategy game, and the camera has to be like this, so you can command large forces at once. The game would be no good if the camera were on the ground, because you would not be able to see anything. It is also in an aerial view, because it is staying loyal to the original tabletop game. Next we will talk about the Elder Scrolls franchise. The Elder Scrolls games have changed over time. They started as a 2D open world fantasy game. It was 2D due to the technology at the time, because the first game launched in 1994. It was also a text-based game, which then changed to a 3D open world fantasy game because of the new technology available. It also allowed you to go first and third person by pressing a button. The Elder Scrolls franchise first made the transition to 3D in 2002 with the third game, Elder Scrolls 3 Morrowind. The Elder Scrolls games can also change perspective when you interact with objects. For example, in Skyrim, if you interact with an object, like mining something, if you are in first person, it will automatically change you to third person, so you can see what's happening. Next we'll move on to a game called Rodina. Rodina is a 3D open world game that is third person when you are flying around and first person when you're on the ground. It changes from first to third person, so you can see your surroundings in different scenarios. For example, when you're flying your spaceship through space and landing on planets, it's better to be in third person. And you can also get a bigger sense of scale, which also further immerses the player. It is also so you can see around better. It goes first person when you land because it gives a sense of scale on the inside of your ship as well, because when you're flying around your ship looks small, but when you land and go into first person, the entire game changes, and your ship looks big, giving you a good space to walk around in. It's also first person, because it makes the planets feel a lot bigger, and adds to that sense of enormous scale. I will now talk about feedback interface. The first game I'll talk about is called Borderlands. Borderlands' interface is not crowded, as most FPS games are, but it is not a clean interface either. Everything on the gameplay screen is pushed into the top and bottom corners. The main focus of the gameplay screen is the gun, because it is a first person shooter. I will now talk about the information that is on the screen. A lot of standard FPS information is given, but it's just been moved around a little bit. For example, the minimap is in the top right of the screen, the mission objectives directly below. The health and shield indicator is in the bottom left of the screen, with your character's special ability directly above that. Your level and XP meter is in the bottom of the screen in the center, and your ammo and grenade indicator is in the bottom right. You also have a weapons reticle in the center of the screen. Most of the indicators on the screen are displayed as bars going across the screen. They are all filled in with colour, and when the bar decreases with colour, for example the ammo bar, if it decreases with colour, it means you are running out. It decreases slightly every time you fire a gun, or for your shield indicator every time you get hit, it will decrease slightly. Different genres of games have different interfaces because of the information needed. I'll now talk about how the interface reacts to the player. When the health bar gets low, it makes an exploding animation on the screen to notify you that you are low on health. Because it is not the main focus on the screen, it has to give you a visual indication that something is happening so you will notice it. When your character levels up, a giant level up icon appears on the screen. It does this to let you know that you have leveled up and further progressed your character. It appears directly in the middle of the screen because leveling up in that game is a big thing, and a lot of the game's mechanics are focused around leveling up. Another one is, when your gun runs out of ammo, a reload icon will appear in the center of the screen. It tells you this because shooting is one of the main focuses of the game, and firing guns is essential. So it has to warn you somewhere that you are looking, that you are out of ammo. It is also doing this so you do not die. Another one is, when you get hit, the top of the screen makes an animation and a noise to signify that you are getting hit and need to move out of the way. When you complete a task, the taskbar will be checked off, telling you that you have completed this certain task and you do not need to pursue it any longer. Assassin's Creed's interface is quite clean. It only consists of a minimap in the bottom left, and a health bar in the top left, and mission objectives just below. Also, when you are changing a weapon wheel appears in the bottom right, and then disappears again once you have selected your weapon. I will now talk about how it reacts. When you get hit, your screen will flash red and make a noise, indicating that you got hit and telling you to get out of the way. When you reach low health, your screen will change, telling you are close to dying and you need to do something. When you change a weapon, the weapon wheel will pop up and make a noise every time you select a different weapon, giving you the indication that you have selected that particular weapon. The minimap will change as you walk around, and setting waypoints will add a number indicator, which will tell you how far away you are from the target you selected. The screen also changes when you are leaving the playable area. It does this to warn you that you are no longer in the playable area and you should turn back before the game resets. I will now talk about FMV. FMV, or full motion video, was another method of making video games in the 90s. It is where you watch an interactive video and you change the outcome of the video and how it plays out by pressing buttons. For example, if you told them to go through a door and something bad happened, it would affect the video in a different way than if you just walked down the hallway. An example I have to show you is called Night Trap. It is where you have to protect some girls using a security camera from murderers, and every button you press leads to a different outcome. This game was not very popular because it was very difficult, and full motion video games as a genre were not very popular because of their lack of interactivity and how clunky the games were. Thanks for watching this video on video game visuals.